I say what ho, this is Brian, call me the Hunter Gardener, coming to you from Ramble On Towers in scenic Bear Valley, New York. You are listening to Ramble On Radio, episode 44. Ramble On Radio is the only dedicated Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Zeppelin news and any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes. Don't forget to leave a review. If you're there, listen to it in Spreaker, and be sure to follow Ramble On Radio on Spreaker. Check it out at I Am Brian Dammit on iTunes, and follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google+, and Ramble On Blog on Twitter, and I don't do Google+ that much. Yes, it's Bear Valley this week. If you get a chance, there's a show out there now called Bitten. It's one of these werewolf shows, actually. It's here in Hespeler, Ontario. It's filmed here. You can almost see the Ramble On Radio. You can almost see the Ramble On Tower itself, the broadcast tower that we're broadcasting to you from, from the tower direct to the internet, etc., etc. And it's called Bitten. It's out there. It's now on and basically the town of Bear Valley, New York, is actually filmed in our little town here in Hespeler. So there you go. All right, so imagine this. It's January 12th, 1969, 45 years ago last Sunday, actually. And you head to the record store. You pick up this new record by this new band. Fellow on guitar used to be in the Yardbirds. And you've kind of heard some stuff about them. Some of the underground radio stations have played a few of their tracks. You get home, and I'm going to be moving away from you for a second. But you get home, you slap it on you put on your big tin can headphones. Remember those with the curly cord? The only kind of headphones you could get. There was no earbuds. There was no nice, flat, sleek-looking headphones. They were great, big, over-the-ear, ear-muffed style phones. You slip them over your head, or you bring the 8-track, you get it in your car, you and your buddy are heading out somewhere, you unwrap the 8-track, slip it into your 8-track player, and this is what you get hit with. That's right, Led Zeppelin 1 is in the stores. A new band has landed, and they're coming to take over your town, your part of the world. Little could you know, listen to that, but you must have been blown away. That opening, the bang bang, and the drums coming in with a tick 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 tick. Everybody talks about the drums on that song. Everybody talks about Bonham. He's astounding on that. What an astounding introduction to the world that song is for a young drummer. But what a guitar part too. What a songwriting. I love that lick. And basically how this works, if you're not musical, that starts out on an E. It's the boom boom is on an E, and kind of establishing the key as being E. But the truth is it's in A. So that first lick sounds a little. It drops actually down to the chord D, and all it is a run on the chord D. Is really just playing out the chord D, and then you kind of slide up from D. You go into a C sharp D, D sharp, boom, into that E again, boom boom, and the C sharp establishes the A, the pattern of the A chord, by the way. But that's really just a bass run. It's an in-between thing. But you've established the key through the second chord, not the first, which is unusual. And you really don't get the full force of the key until the second verse. That's a phenomenal lick, though. It's such a cool lick. And then, so you write a lick that good, you say, let's do a 3-minute song with this. Like, no, one verse. Then we're going to change it. And then they drop down to F sharp minor, which is, this is getting technical, but it's the relative minor of A. It still falls within the key, I guess is the point. It's if you can have a major or minor key within the same key. And so they drop it to the F sharp minor. And that's when you really establish the song as an A. It's not until kind of the chorus, the first A chord comes up in the chorus, but it's when you hit that F sharp minor that you've really gone, now we're in key. So it leaves you a little bit in an awkward place. From an audible standpoint, there's almost a bit of friction or tension there because it starts on the E, but it's not in E. And until you kind of establish that F sharp minor, in the second verse, you've kind of left the hearer a little bit on edge. It's an odd thing. It's craftsmanship, right? It's not just a song they threw together one day. It's somebody thought about that, and it's not unheard of, by the way. It's not, but it is. It makes for a very interesting. It's not just another hard rock song in the key of E or key of A. Either way, lots of those around. Led Zeppelin do lots of those. It's not just another one. Because of the way it starts with the E chord, although it's in the A key, and then drops to the minor. Phenomenal bit of work. Phenomenal bit of guitar playing in that. It's a drum showcase, and yet it's got astounding, and it's the start. It's the first song on the album. It's the first song on the first album. What a way to establish a band. What a way to do it. All right, so from there, you go right out of that, you go into Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And I'm just going to talk about that first album. I wasn't there when it first came out. And as a matter of fact, it's not one. I got into them in 76 and kind of relearned their albums backwards. And the one I almost stopped at, I won't say I never listened to the first or second one, but the third one was where I stopped and went, oh. So the first and second have always been in my mind setup albums. They're okay albums. Comparable to Truth, the Jeff Beck group has been made through the years, including by Jeff Beck. Interesting, I'm reading Rod Stewart right now, his autobiography, which if you're, pick it up, it's good. It is. He's a very good writer. He's a very good storyteller. And he talks about that, and he says, kind of the difference between us and them was they could actually write a song. Whereas Jeff Beck didn't write songs, and Stewart and Wood had never done so. They kind of decided maybe we should do this, but while they were with Jeff Beck, they never really did establish themselves. So it wasn't until they were with the Faces a year or two later that they established any sort of songwriting ability. So it's not that there's nothing extraordinary about this album stylistically, but it stands out for a variety of reasons, and it's. I just mentioned the Good Times, Bad Times. That's something Jeff Beck Group didn't do. And then they go into Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Right away, right? That hard rock, but with an interesting twist, Good Times, Bad Times, right down to the acoustic. But they established a pattern that would happen throughout their career is acoustic songs that are really powerful. And I've said this before, this is a band who could play a couple of acoustic guitars, a singer and acoustic guitar and a mandolin, and blow some bands off the stage in terms of raw energy. And Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is an example of that. It's a couple of acoustic guitars, and he throws in some slide. But it's a phenomenal performance piece, for one. Robert Plant really is. If Good Times, Bad Times establishes John Bonham, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You really establishes Robert Plant as a singer to be contended with. It's a phenomenal vocal performance. And if you don't think so, put on the headphones, put on the big canny things, and listen to it again. I did last night. I had it on my iPod last night, and he hits every note. He's astoundingly good in this song. But again, Page establishes real parameters for his performance in this band here too, and I love it's the little add-ins that bands don't always do, and the things that made Zeppelin different was the way they did. It was the touches, the fine points. Everybody can play an A chord, right? But it's the way they layered up those chords, or it's the way they used bridges, and you kind of didn't go verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. They had bridges, they had movements, they had, really thought about songwriting more as a classical composition style a lot of times. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You as an example. Now, they didn't write it. They give themselves credit in the first album's traditional arrangement, establishing another pattern that would be consistent throughout their career, I guess. But it's the things like the little slide as the song's building, as they're moving into the electric, or a Spanish acoustic solo coming out of the hard part and page, and it just makes you go, oh. There's an opera called Tchaikovsky wrote an opera called Eugene Onegin. I think it was his only opera, and it's about it starts with this 14-year-old girl, and her parents are upper crust in Russia and having this party, and in walks this soldier, well dressed, well fine, older man, and he is Eugene Onegin. And this 14-year-old girl develops a massive crush on him. And nothing creepy, by the way. This is very Disney-like. It's just fluttering on. The second scene, she's in her bedroom, and she's getting ready for bed. And it's about a 16-minute piece. It's one piece. It's the entire scene is just her, and she's singing, kind of doing the dopey little girl thing, how she feels. And about 2/3 of the way through, she settles into this nice melody. And in come below her these French horns. And they rise up, swell up, and then come back. And swell up and come back. And it's gorgeous. And it sends, I'm telling you, I could play it for you and you're not an opera fan. And you go, oh yeah, I hear it. I feel that. It's an astounding moment. I wouldn't recommend Eugene Onegin as an introductory opera for anybody, by the way. It's a tough one. But that kind of second scene is gorgeous. And it is... if you're just going to sit and listen to a couple of pieces of opera, I might put that in there and say, listen to this. So, excuse me. So anyway, that's when the slide comes in on "Babe, I'm Going to Leave You." That's what he's doing. He's that same kind of thing as the French horns I forget her name now. And you know what? I actually made a note of it here. I think it's Tatiana. I think Tatiana is the name. And so Tatiana's aria. And that's that slide coming in. It does the same thing. So anyway, I guess what we're establishing, what I'm trying to establish here is there's real songcraft going on. They made this thing they met in August of 1968. This album was released in January of 1969. There's something like 18 hours in the studio they put into it. One week tour, a couple of weeks rehearsal, 1 week tour, 18 hours in the studio, and this is what they produced. And that's well thought out. That's well crafted. God, they must have been working 24 hours, to get it done. Next up is "You Shook Me" with the solid slide solo, the solid slide solo, the solid harmonica solo, harmonica work by Robert Plant. And Jonesy even gets a little organ solo in there. And then, of course, followed by "Dazed and Confused." "Dazed and Confused," of course, became a standard bearer for this band, the live showcase, for years and years and years. Interestingly, it wasn't immediately solo. Interestingly, how many more times was really the live showcase, his first couple of tours? But "Dazed and Confused" eventually took it over, and if you almost have to see it live to appreciate it. It's one of those pieces. I think "No Quarter" is the same. It needs a live touch to really get the juices flowing the way it should. I'm going to see "Get the Lead Out." They do a great version of "Dazed and Confused," and they try to stay pretty close to the album, although they extend it a bit. It really is, wow, and it's a piece. It's got verse, chorus, bridge, movement, solo, other movement. It's like 7 songs in one. It really is thought of like a classical piece, thought through like a classical piece. Now, of course, it came from the Yardbirds, a piece called "I'm Confused." If you ever get a chance to listen to the live Yardbirds featuring Jimmy Page, they have that on it. I'm guessing Robert has wrote the lyrics, rewrote the lyrics, because they are rewritten from "I'm Confused" to "Dazed and Confused." Just had a wave of thoughts disappear out my head. But Robert gets no writing credits on this album because he has a he still has a contract with CBS Records from his very early days, and he can't get a writing credit on this album. Otherwise, they would own part of the album or something. But the guess is, like, I think Good Times, Bad Times sounds like a Robert lyric to me. I certainly think Days Confused, the changes to Days Confused is very Robert. Wanted a woman, never bargained for you. So long as, Soul of a Woman was created below, that sort of stuff. That's all Robert to me. And I talked earlier about establishing the band. They've established certain principles. By the end of this is the first album, right? By the end of the first side of the first album, they have established some core principles of Led Zeppelin that would last throughout their career. They have. It has the hard, heavy rock. It has the thunderous acoustic song. It has the blues with the slide guitar, the harmonica, the organ solo. It's got Plant singing about the evil, soulless woman. It's got this crisp, beautiful playing at times. It's got sloppy playing at times. It's got intricate, interesting drum work. And if you listen to Days of Confused, the drumming in that, he really lays back up. So, and then you've established John Paul Jones as well as a front kind of bass guy with Days of Confused. Almost everything about this band that would come to stand the test of time has been established in this first album. Now it grows, it develops, it turns into other things, but so much of the band is there right off the bat, first 4 songs. And if the one thing missing, interestingly, is the keyboard opus, the big keyboard song. For that, we have to slide over to side 2, song 1, for Your Time Is Gonna Come. And it starts with the keyboard, and it establishes that now it's not Kashmir in terms of the big, he's using an organ, but it is flat out, plain and simple, a big keyboard song. And again, those Robert kind of lyrics, lying, cheating, hurting, that's all you seem to do, messing around with every guy in town. If Robert's got to have written that. He just has to have. Did you not think? It's messing a guy around with every guy in town. Is that not, hey, what can I do as well? So, yeah, I think, and I know there's, who is it? The Barney Hoskins book, I think, kind of suggests that Robert didn't really write any lyrics in this, that it was already all done. But boy, that sounds like Robert to me, that lying, cheating, hurting, the whole Your Time Is Going to Come. Maybe somebody had the solo together. The one thing they do in Your Time Is Going to Come, how many more times? I'm trying to think where else. Good Times, Bad Times is background vocals, and in Your Time Is Going to Come, a big background vocals, kind of big chorusy background that they never do again, and they never really do live. And they never really have a lot of background vocals. That's kind of the one thing that's here that never shows up again. I'm trying to think. There's nothing like Your Time Is Going to Come in terms of that shows up again down the road. Anyway. And then we slide into Black Mountain Side by Jimmy Page, by the way, credited to Jimmy Page on my copy. I should point out, You Shook Me is credited to Willie Dixon. But Your Time Is Gonna, or Black Mountain Side credited to Jimmy. And it's not. It's really Bert Jantz's piece. Although there's something that Jimmy's done to it that's different that I can never. And the interesting thing, they come out of, it almost co-joins with Your Time Is Going to Come. So they're really still fading Your Time Is Going to Come, and all of a sudden there's this guitar there, emerges out of it almost like, I don't know, I'm trying to use a visual imagery in my mind. I got a visual image in my mind that I don't think makes sense, so I'm going to leave it. But it's interesting that it's fading, and then in comes Your Time Is, or Black Mountain Side. And Black Mountain Side, of course, ends, and immediately, there's not a 3-second gap, there's not a 2-second gap, it's about a half a second gap. It ends, Communication Breakdown, which is a whole nother gear change. And it's a whole nother song. Comparable, I suppose, in some ways to Good Times, Bad Times, except Communication Breakdown starts in E and is in E, and it's a straightforward rock song. There's nothing interesting about Communication Breakdown. It's blasted away. It's blasted that wall. It's just a rock song. Boom. Again, to me, Robert lyrics. but that's, but it's maybe, some people say pre-punk, I don't know. Is it a punk song? Yeah, in a way it is, right? It's what, 2 minutes, 26 seconds long, which is it the shortest Led Zeppelin song? It might be. It's certainly the most direct and impactful, and it just goes verse, chorus, solo, gone. There's no fooling around in it, that's for sure. And that may be, we need a song. Maybe very much what happened. We need a song. We got, we got XYZ, and they in the studio just banged off something fast. It may well be what the case is, but it works. It's a phenomenal piece, and again, coming out of Black Mountain Side like that, it's just it's over. Black Mountain Side just ended, and I Can't Quit You, Babe. More, again with the slide solo and the big harp stuff, and again on my copy credited to Willie Dixon, and I'm trying to think. I've had this copy since the 70s. I'm somewhere in my mind. I think that didn't they have to give credit down the road to Willie Dixon? Didn't they? I thought this is one of the songs they supposedly stole, along with "You Shook Me." But in both cases, Willie Dixon gets the credit. Again on my copy, and I don't know what to I don't know what to tell you. It specifically says on my copy, this stereo album may be played on mono equipment. They didn't really, if you pick up an album now that they, the new remasters won't say that on it, for instance. I'm willing to bet. I think this is probably from the late 70s. Maybe very early 80s, but I would guess I had it by 77, 78. So, I don't know. I thought they had taken their own credit for those songs, and then were forced to kind of give credit back. But both of those are Willie Dixon. And this is maybe the album, and I listened to it last night, and wow, this really is a better album than I've ever given it credit. It's not an album I've ever given a lot of credit for being a great album. And I think it's those two blues songs and I like the blues stuff, but they're really just with those. They're just doing, again, this, if you want to make it comparable to the Jeff Beck group. And I think was it You Shook Me they did on Truth? But it was one of those two blues songs. And they did more or less this very similar version. So there was nothing exceptional in those songs. You know what I mean? And to me, bring down the album a bit. I have it. Yeah, it's You Shook Me. It is You Shook Me from side one, that Jeff Beck did. So in the second album, they throw in the old Bring It On Home, but it's a complete change up. In the third album, they have their own blues, which is an astounding Since I've Been Loving You. To me, this one is just... This is what drags the album down, these two blues songs. And I get it that, well, these are songs we all know, and we have no time at all to make this album. So that's not a complaint. That's not, hey, fuck guys, write some songs for crying out loud. I get what they were doing. I get what they were trying to get out there. And I get also that was kind of the marketplace at the time. So if you wanted to establish your marketplace, those couple of songs helped to get in the same way that Jeff Beck was doing those songs. So were Cream, were kind of pulling out those old blues songs, and before them, of course, and other bands. And so part of the marketplace was you get a song like it's like if you were releasing a first album now, throwing in a song that had an element of hip hop, whether it be even just a rap in a couple of the verses or something. There's a girl singer called Claire. Oh, I can't remember her name off the hand. But I got a copy because one of my blogs, I kind of write about music. Claire London is her name. Because I sometimes write about music, I occasionally get these, links to download this album and give it a listen to, and it'd be someone's premiere album, that sort of thing. and I got this Claire London album, and she is kind of a soulful singer, got a rocky edge, and I follow her on Facebook, or liked her on Facebook, and she's posted stuff like, because it's Led fucking Zeppelin, that's why, or something like that. It was some sign, and it said, there's some, and I forget what it was, but in other words, she's a Led Zeppelin fan, and she gets that they're an important band, and maybe the band. So her music does reflect that a bit. But she had one song that had more or less she rapped it, or at least the verses. It wasn't a bad song, by the way. It wasn't some, it was actually kind of very soulfully done. But that's, if you want to hit the marketplace, that's probably something you have nowadays to establish yourself a bit, right? To create a place within the market, or so I guess that's what I'm saying. I see why these blues pieces were added at this time on this album. I just think they make it a little less interesting than the later Led Zeppelin albums. How's that? And then it finishes off with How Many More Times. And How Many More Times, like Your Time Is Gonna Come and Thank You, these are songs that, and How Many More Times was the first live, and if you listen to the early live shows, and they play the Hunter in it and stuff, they did the medley through that. They kind of finished off the shows with it. It was a major showpiece. It was a phenomenal, because they get a groove going. Kind of like Dave Matthews does nowadays. It's like it's a 3.5 minute song here. But live it was a 12-minute song, and it ran that groove throughout it. They just kind of establish a groove and ride it. And but like Thank You and Your Time Is Gonna Come in this song, these kind of keyboardy, almost ballady, that lower tempo, lower volume. Not quite, but almost fall into the kind of adult contemporary category, right? You could slide these into the something like Thank You or How Many More Times into the real lame-o radio stations, and they work. Although this is better than most of that stuff, and it's again, Your Time Is Gonna Come and How Many More Times, excellent songs, both of them. But there's a type of song that they return to in Led Zeppelin 2, and in my mind, I don't think they ever went back to it again. There are three little examples of this type of song, this pattern of songwriting, and then it was done. That was it. I'm trying to think offhand if there's a third or a fourth, but with the organ solo, the big organ, acoustic guitars, gentle kind of beat, rocking beat, and it's they're nice songs, and I know Thank You is one that a lot of people like a lot. I think it's one of their nicer songs. I would actually take these two songs over Thank You. But I understand what you're saying. I don't fundamentally disagree. But it's not my favorite. But I don't hate it either. I guess is what I'm saying. I don't dislike it even. It's just not. I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't put it in my top 50 Led Zeppelin songs. Whereas I might with How Many More Times. I might just. But anyway, that's the album that you put on your turntable, you listen to in your headphones, and I'm telling you, that bang bang off the start with Good Times, Bad Times, the funky little drums, and then the gear changes, the mood changes, the shifts this takes all through the album. You would have been blown away. I'm sure of it. I'm sure it must have been just wow. Listen to it now. Led Zeppelin 2 comes out in November, and actually late October, I think. And it's a different beast, right? It's almost all boof. Although obviously, I just talked about Thank You, and it's got What Is and What Should Never Be. But it's got a lot more of the bang, a lot less of the subtlety to fall back into. And we understand why. It was a road album. But this is, for a first album, for like I said, I just went through the timetable for you. they did some shows in September. They met in August. They did some shows in September. They recorded. They did an odd show here or there. They, in the meanwhile, they're off selling the album. Wow, wow. Can you imagine a band going to the studio now for 18 hours and pulling out something this good? And where are those bands? What happened? What happened to those bands? People complain about record companies and A&R guys, and they don't develop bands. This is the first album. These guys met 6 months earlier, before its release. There's no reason that bands couldn't do this now. Whether they develop into what Led Zeppelin became would be another story, but there's no reason this couldn't happen now, and yet it doesn't. It simply doesn't. And I'm not sure why. I think that's a lot more complex than just bad record companies and bad business. And I suspect gets far more into auto tuners and click tracks. You know what I mean? People are far too interested in being precise nowadays instead of what this was, which was emotional, which was moving. It was impactful with mistakes. And that's. I wonder if that's a flaw in the system these days, the run for perfection. Anyway, that's. I wanted to talk really briefly about something else happened in the last 2 weeks in 1969, 45 years ago, and that would be. I think it was on what day is today? 22nd. So I think it was the 20th. I think 2 days ago. I am recording this on the Wednesday. You will be listening to it on the Wednesday/Thursday, I'm sure. And that was the show that maybe happened. It was down in Texas, and I don't, I don't even have them written down. I meant to. But the movie Led Zeppelin played here is based on this concert that maybe happened, maybe didn't happen. And they had just been out west. They had done their run of shows. They were heading east, and in between, supposedly they played at this place in this small town in Texas for 200 people, sort of thing. And there's no actual physical evidence that the show ever happened. And like I said, there's a movie out, and I've talked about the movie a number of times called Led Zeppelin Played Here, and it did premiere in New York a couple of months back. I'd love to hear from somebody who, if they saw it, what do you think? But Led Zeppelin Played Here is the name of the movie, and it's just an interesting case of, we know by 1973 every show they did, every song they played, every performance. O Page was on that night, O Page was off that night. And you think the 1969, and there's no, there's this concert that happened or did it. And it's a lot harder to find. It's amazing how fast that kind of story disappears in the world, because bands like Led Zeppelin became, by 72, 73, even if Led Zeppelin were starting out then, their history would be a lot better documented than it was in 1969. And it's a phenomenal documentary of the 1969 tour. We have a lot of those shows available to listen to. But there's a lot of gaps and question marks too that wouldn't happen now, wouldn't happen later on in festivities. Anyway, that's it for Ramble on Radio, episode 14. Check out rambleonradio.com for notes on this week's podcast, Led Zeppelin news and reviews, and any links mentioned during today's podcast. Please follow Ramble on Radio on Facebook, Google+, and Ramble on Blog on Twitter. You can subscribe to Ramble on Radio through iTunes. Don't forget to leave a review. Listen on Spreaker, and be sure to follow me, Ramble on Radio, on Spreaker. And check it out at I Am Brian Dammit on iTunes. Thank you for listening to Ramble on Radio. This is episode 44, and I will see you next week.
Switch off the internet.
New band. Fellow on guitar used to be on in the Yardbirds, and you've kind of heard some stuff about them. Some of the underground radio stations have played a few of their tracks. You get home, and I'm going to be moving away from you for a second. So, but you get home, you slap it on you put on your big tin can headphones. Remember those with the curly cord? The only kind of headphones you could get. There was no earbuds. There was no nice, flat, sleek-looking headphones. They were great, big, over-the-ear, ear-muffed style phones. You slip them over your head, or you bring the 8-track, you get it in your car, you and your buddy are heading out somewhere, you unwrap the 8-track, slip it into your 8-track player, and this is what you get hit with. I say what ho, this is Brian, call me the Hunter Gardener, coming to you from Ramble On Towers in scenic Bear Valley, New York. You are listening to Ramble On Radio, episode 44. Ramble On Radio is the only dedicated Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internet, so be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Zeppelin news and any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes. Don't forget to leave a review. If you're there, listen to it in Spreaker, and be sure to follow Ramble On Radio on Spreaker. Check it out at I Am Brian Dammit on iTunes, and follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google Plus, and Ramble On Blog on Twitter. And I don't do Google Plus that much. Yes, it's Bear Valley this week. If you get a chance, there's a show out there now called Bitten. It's one of these werewolf shows, actually. It's here in Hespeler, Ontario. It's filmed here. You can almost see the Ramble On Radio. You can almost see the Ramble On Tower itself, the broadcast tower that we're broadcasting to you from, from the tower direct to the internet, etc., etc. And it's called Bitten. It's out there. It's now on and basically the town of Bear Valley, New York, is actually filmed in our little town here in Hespeler. So there you go. All right, so imagine this. It's January 12th, 1969, 45 years ago last Sunday, actually. And you head to the record store. You pick up this new record by this knee, and kind of establishing the key as being E. But the truth is it's in A. So that first lick sounds a little, it drops actually down to the chord D, and all it is a run on the chord D. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Is really just playing out the chord D. And then you kind of slide up from D, you go into a C sharp, D, D sharp, boom, into that E again. Boom, boom. And the C sharp establishes the A, the pattern of the A chord, by the way. But that's really just a bass run. It's an in-between thing. But you've established the key through the second chord, not the first, which is unusual. And you really don't. That's right. Led Zeppelin 1 is in the stores. A new band has landed. And they're coming to take over your town, your part of the world. Little could you know, listen to that, you must have been blown away. That opening, the bang bang, and the drums coming in with a tick 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 tick. Everybody talks about the drums on that song. Everybody talks about Bonham. He's astounding on that. What an astounding introduction to the world that song is for a young drummer. But what a guitar part too. What a songwriting. I love that lick. And basically how this works, if you're not musical, that starts out on an E. It's the boom boom is on an E.